Hello, I'm Simon Roderick from FramSearch, and I'm delighted to be joined from Dublin by Jasper Walshe, the founder of TRIPSTank. Jasper, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Simon. Yeah, I'm great.
We haven't spoken to each other for a long time, but I'm really looking forward to this session, actually. When we first met all those years ago, you had a very good career in financial services. You've now built an executive coaching business. And it's an area, if I'm honest, that lots of my senior candidates are really interested in, but actually not as many of them take action on it as you'd think. So I'm
Mm.
keen to explore it further, to learn more about executive coaching and leadership development. But before I get onto all that, I wonder if you could tell me about your journey into executive coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. When we met, I was working in the city in London, and you kindly helped me get placed into a wealth management role. So my background, even prior to that, was I started off in investment banking with Merrill's, and then moved into more banking sales roles, and that transitioned then into private banking. And then finally into wealth management. And I suppose what I was exposed to throughout that period from early 2000s through to 2013, we went through the financial crisis and everything else. So I had worked through buyouts, mergers. I had been an employee in a bank that was nationalized and subsequently liquidated. That same bank was the highest performing bank share globally for like 3 or 4 years in a row up to that. So it was an unbelievably exciting place to work for a while. And then the wheels came off, and it was a desperate place to work in those times. So that's one thing that was a formative part in me moving into coaching. Was I experienced the highs and lows from a people cultural perspective over a number of years, and it had given me a great curiosity into um, learning more about the roles that leaders can play, as well as how culture and teams evolve. I saw a huge latency of potential uh, not being tapped into. It was just incredible. The amount of intelligence and experience that was not being used or leveraged by firms, to me, seemed like an enormous waste of life and talent. So I was keen to explore that. The second thing was, in my private banking and wealth management roles, I was dealing with what the industry terms high net worths and ultra high net worth individuals, which I'm sure your audience are familiar with. Highly successful people on certain levels. Um, some of them had a lot more balance and a lot more fulfillment than others. Others seemed never satisfied. So I was massively uh, interested and curious about the psychology of their success. So they were two kind of key things that led me into it. I then did two diplomas concurrently, and actually took the step about going into it. But they were the kind of the driving forces that piqued my curiosity.
So for those of us that haven't gone down an executive coaching route, I wonder if you could kind of give us an insight into under the bonnet, really. I mean, typically, who engages the coach? Is it the firm or the individual? And what are the reasons for engaging a coach?
So there's a number of different ways to consider how coaching can be used in a corporate environment. It can be one-to-one, and within that one-to-one coaching, it can be anything from someone who's taken redundancy and is on an exit strategy. You can get support in that, or it can be C-suite around performance, around balance, and it can be leadership coaching. It used to be pretty much a form of support for C-suite, or for what I would call kind of problem children, so to speak. Uh, and now it's not. It's much more. There's a breadth of coaching services available for pretty much every level in every organization, should they so wish. The other thing then is there's one-to-one, but there's also team coaching, which I do a lot of. Again, massive untapped resource within organizations is the concept and dynamic of team. Um, and then there's group coaching, which I do a lot of too. So that could be a group of partners in a law firm who have been maybe made up to partner in years 1 to 3, um, and they're moving into equity partnership now, and that's another transition again. So you take them through a program of a couple of group sessions, then some one-to-ones, and then group again at the end. Um, so who engages it? It depends on what coaching need is. It might come from an individual, it might come from a leader of a team who sees really high performing individuals, but no shared knowledge, no shared learning, no actual cohesion from a team dynamic, just a similar reporting line. And if you create a team out of that and you get everyone aligned in the right way, you get a massive shift in results. So it can come from the business unit director or leader, or it can come from a HR if there's a kind of a wider need, or the individual itself.
That's really interesting for me to hear, because my perception has always been that the service has been very much focused on senior individuals. And it's actually really good to hear that people that are earlier on in their career or in middle management roles are being identified as people that could benefit from coaching, because let's be honest, we can all benefit in some way. Some coach, whether it's sport or with our careers. And so that's really good to hear that people are looking at that level. Sticking with more senior individuals and those in leadership positions, when they come to you as a coach, what are the main hopes and fears that you see for individuals?
So in the financial services industry, a lot of people have been promoted into leadership positions based off their revenue generation or technical abilities, not because of their leadership skill set. So a lot of very highly qualified, highly capable individuals are thrust into a leadership position because that's what the next stage of the corporate ladder looks like, without really having given much consideration as to what leadership involves and what the responsibilities would be, or B, without having any kind of support in developing those skills in advance of going into the role. Now, that's changing today in most organizations, but it's not necessarily perfect yet either. So the challenges that a lot of people currently in very senior positions have is the human connection piece. And especially with the age group up to 35, call them millennials, and the kind of stereotypes that comes with that, if you like. But really what we're talking about here is we're talking about a generation of individuals who have had more of a voice throughout their adolescence and early adult life than we might have been afforded in our time. They've come through the early parts of their career when it was a much less linear progression than when we came through. So we came through, you go in, you're 22 to 25 years old, you work your rear end off for X number of years, you get promoted to the next level, then to the next level, then to the next level. Providing you keep working and you do what you're supposed to do, you get there. It was very linear. Now there's just so many different pieces coming in. There's so many different disruptions in one sector can lead to disruptions in another. The breaking down of silos and different P&Ls within financial services organizations, and the needs of clients engaging with financial service organizations, whether it's corporate finance houses or even wealth management businesses. It requires expertise from the product side, the account side, the even sometimes now with the technology side, to create that product and service and solution for the client. So greater sense of collaboration is generally a need across the board, and how that manifests itself at senior leadership level is, well, they're kind of realizing, well, in order for me to connect better with these people, I have to understand and lead myself first. So where are my blind spots? Why are the people who are reporting into me not quite doing what I was hoping they would do? Is it a communications issue? Is it because I'm not aware of my own blind spots? Is what I'm communicating not landing with them the way it's intended? I would say it's generally the greatest need is around that human connection piece and that understanding what the messaging is and how to deliver it clearly across the board.
I suppose that's fascinating to watch as well, because I know that with the work that we do, you quite often see the best salesperson, as you identified, is often then made the team manager. That's not always, your best salesperson isn't always the best person to lead a team. But I should imagine for a lot of people, it's maybe the first time in their career that maybe they haven't had instant success, and they're trying to convey their ideas to the team, as you're suggesting, but they're not quite able to get the team to align in the way that they want, to perform the way that they want. So I'm guessing there are techniques that you have and programs that you have that help people overcome that transition. Is that right?
Absolutely. And what you're touching upon there is really important, because if a high performing salesperson gets promoted into a management or leadership position, they'll typically think that the way they do things is the way that everyone else should be doing it. And we're all wired differently. We all see the world through different lenses and different perspectives. We all have different strengths, skills, and experience, as well as perspectives. So even if we did have the same perspective, we'd still go about achieving goals differently. So a leader's role today is not to tell people what to do. It is to coach them to better understand what their best way of achieving the end result is. And for that the end result bit is really important. I think leaders have to give clarity as to what the vision, or the, if it's a project, what the project endpoint is. And autonomy is only valuable to an organization, like individual autonomy is only valuable to an organization when that clarity is crystal clear.
Right.
Otherwise, you get people working in an autonomous way in multiple different directions, and there's no alignment. Um, so, but to go back to your point, and it's a really important one, Simon, is coaching itself is a skill that leaders have to develop these days. I mean, I'm doing a big piece of work with Deloitte at the moment on this, and it's all about, they coach at a peer-to-peer level from senior manager up. There are conversations and feedback conversations throughout the year, rather than an annual performance appraisal. They're feedback conversations. They're two-way conversations. And where there's a gap and a development need, it's, well, if I was your manager, I'd be saying, okay, Simon, how do you see the gap? What are your suggestions as to how you're going to bridge it? To get to where we need you to get to, what support do you need from us? Where do you feel that you need extra additional help or investment? And that gives you ownership of your career plan and development plan going forward, rather than you getting the hump with me for telling you what to do and it not being the way you want to do things, and feeling like you're being micromanaged. Or the opposite end of that spectrum is, Simon, I need you to go do that, come back to me when it's done. And that sink or swim style just doesn't work with the younger generation anymore. They like clarity around the expectation and the reason why it's important. So a sense of purpose. And then once they have the why and the what, then the how is largely left up to them.
Yeah, fascinating. So that's very much actually comes back to what you're saying about, perhaps when we entered the workplace, you were sent away to complete a task and do it. But just to kind of summarize what you're saying, what we really need is a clear corporate vision, individual coaching plans, and sort of regular feedback for the people that you're working with. That's just from for those watching, that's a really good I think synopsis of some of the things that you might do. Have you seen, because of COVID and obviously an intensification of perhaps the pressures that we're seeing, an acceleration of the changes that are happening in the marketplace, have you seen people's aims change around what they want to get from coaching? Have their needs changed, either at a corporate level or from an individual level?
Yeah, definitely. Well, with so many people working remotely, a big thing with teams these days is hearing everyone's voice. So having everyone contribute and feeling valued for their contribution. So that comes up an awful lot. I do most of my work, Simon, is done with leaders in client-facing, fee-earning roles. So that's why I still work in financial services a lot, but also in professional services with lawyers, the Big Four, and another industry with similar profiles is technology and the kind of the sales arms of the tech firms. And yet the individual well-being is a big concern across all corporate levels at the moment. And how do the company maintain and grow their culture without being in the same building as each other? So it is challenging. We still do a good bit of work in the investment banking market in central London, and they're like you mentioned to me offline a few minutes ago. They're very active. The industry's it's busy, and they're doing well, but there are a few people who are falling by the wayside and not doing well for themselves, despite doing well in terms of performance.
Yeah,
And I think that's a
sorry,
concern across the board. Sorry, Simon. Yeah.
I was very worried a couple of weeks ago, actually, about the amount of people I was talking to that were really struggling, I think, with the home working, homeschooling. The weather was awful. So I understand that dynamic really well. I think going forwards, actually, talking to the senior individuals that we do, what you identified there around how do you build culture when perhaps people are in the office 2 or 3 days a week, when you're not quite sure who's in on what day, or a lot of people are going to be working from home more. I think that, getting that sense of cohesion is going to be much more of a challenge, and lots of people are going to be working on those areas. So that's fascinating. Coming back to the coaching side of things, 2 questions really. What makes for a good coaching relationship? And secondly, we've talked about in the past, I use the word mentee, which I'm not sure actually is even technically a word, but it is used quite often. And I know that you said actually that's probably not the best way to describe the coaching relationship. So I wonder if you could just tell me about what makes a good relationship and why that word doesn't perhaps describe best how the dynamic works.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the second part of that question. Coaching is not advice-based. It's a facilitative process, and it's forward-looking. So if I go to my mentor, of which I have a few, I'm asking that subject matter expert for their counsel around a specific subject matter, but I'm looking to understand their thoughts on it. Now, depending on the mentor-mentee relationship, I can either take that advice or opinion on board as advice for me, or I can take it on board and say, well, that's what this individual did in those circumstances. What's relevant for me and how do I apply it? That's up for that's the kind of the bandwidth within mentorship. Coaching is different. Coaching is, rather than going outside of oneself for the answer or for advice, it's the illumination of potential pathways forward that I then choose, but I'm the one conjuring up the pathway. It's, as Carl Jung said, it's making the unconscious conscious. So it's tapping into the ideas that I've had before, the strengths that I've buried in there somehow, the ideas that have been suppressed or the learnings that have been suppressed, and bringing them back out and kind of going, right, well, look, I've given this a lot of consideration in the past, and actually, I did do something similar to this before, and this is what worked well, or this isn't what worked well, so I won't go that way. And then it's like, I might have 3 different options as to how I can move forward, and a coach will just help clarify what these options are. Are they aligned to what you said the objective was of where you want to get to? Okay, any one of the 3 paths potentially could work, according to you, Simon, the coachee. Which one do you choose? So now you're empowered to make a choice about the direction of travel that you're taking. So what happens then if it's the right path for you? You learn. If it's the wrong path for you, you learn. You don't turn around and go, Jasper, you told me to do the wrong thing. Because there's a problem with that, but if you fall into that cycle, it's what we call the Karpman triangle or the drama triangle, where there's a victim, a rescuer, and a persecutor. And if you fall into the psychological contract with me that you're the victim and I'm the rescuer, so I need advice, this is your advice, go do that. If it's the wrong advice, you become the persecutor. So you come back and you go, you waste of space, Jasper. You told me to do this. It was the wrong thing. You're not learning anything about yourself other than you don't think my advice is any good. So coaching is an elicitation and a facilitation of my understanding of the situation, my self-awareness, for me to choose and be empowered to choose the right path forward for me. And therefore, I'm in a constant learning cycle. I can only improve by being coached well. Only improve.
And how do I choose a coach? What do I look? What do you look for?
You look for rapport first and foremost. I would personally, I'd look for a body of experience and some sort of results, a transaction sheet, so to speak. I would also look for, this is when I'm looking for a coach, I would insist on only working with a coach who gets coached themselves. Otherwise, to me, it just doesn't make sense how any coach is uncoached. How can I facilitate my own growth and development if I'm not being coached myself? So that's a big no-no for me if a coach doesn't say off the top of their tongue instantly, yeah, my coach is X, Y, Z. Like that's an essential for me, a non-negotiable. What does the relationship need? It needs complete and utter commitment to the process. So the coach doesn't have a magic wand. You're not going outside of yourself to the coach for the coach to give you the answers. You're going to do the heavy lifting. The coach is just giving you a structure, a relationship, and a level of accountability to yourself for you to move yourself forward. Yes, the skill set they bring from their qualification and training will be around effective listening, insightful questioning, and I suppose summarizing and calling you out and challenging you in a supportive way as to what you're choosing to work towards and making sure that you stay on track towards that. But yeah, a critical ally is a term that's been used, that was used in my training, that kind of sticks in the mind. So it's that challenging supporter. Yeah, I'm going to be robust in my checking in with you, but ultimately we're on the same side of the table here, working in partnership. Co-creating is another term used in the industry, your roadmap forward for you to action.
And it's giving you some sort of accountability, isn't it? Rather than just setting yourself some vague goals that maybe you'll hit, and actually if you don't hit them, so what, they can roll into next year, next month, or whatever it may be.
Well, the accountability, yeah, it's a key piece, but I mean, I don't want to underplay, just because you're going to be doing the heavy lifting as the coachee, I don't want to underplay the skill and the acceleration to the process that the coach will bring. If you had the answers in your conscious mind and at the tip of your tongue, you'd be delivering them. They're not, they're in there, but they need to be brought out. And that's what a coach's skill is.
Yeah, absolutely. And how long does a coaching program normally last?
It can be, that can vary, Simon. There's one client who I worked with recently. We used a profiling tool to open up the dialogue and accelerate the conversation. And then we had 3 sessions on the back of that. It was probably done within 2 months. And that would be the shortest I would personally work around. I typically don't work under 6 sessions, which is in or around, I mean, you'd rarely have a session within 2 sessions within 2 weeks of each other, and you'd hope they wouldn't go beyond 5 or 6 weeks. So typically speaking, 6 sessions will be 6 months.
And do people come back for top-ups, or is it very much, we're going to help you on this aspect, and that takes about 12 weeks, and therefore the next aspect takes another 12? I mean, do people have top-ups?
Yeah, so there's ongoing relationships too, but what a coach would need to be very clear with their coachee on is that they're not creating independence on the coaching relationship. So from an ethical viewpoint, it would be very important, if I'm working with someone on a 6-session package, that we have clear outcomes we're aiming for. We've measured exactly when those outcomes will be met by either quantifiable metrics or observational behaviors that we'll need to see being exhibited. So we'll know exactly what we're working towards and what success looks like. So the return on the investment is clear. If that individual then comes back and goes, look, I'd like to continue, it'd be like, okay, great, very happy. In what realm and for what need and to achieve what? So that we're clear on what we're working towards. It's not just a cozy chat.
Right. Yeah, there's a productive outcome that comes from that.
Yeah. Now, there are executive coaching dialogues, especially with the more senior leaders, that can be kind of, look, just a sounding board, running through whatever's coming up for that individual at that time, but it would still be aligned to a set of objectives, like optimizing my leadership, communicating clearly with myself and with my immediate reporting team, or delivering for the board, and you'd need to make sure that the coaching conversations were aligned with those objectives, even if the coaching agreement is an ongoing rolling one of, say, a conversation and a coaching session once a month.
Yeah, well, that's been really fascinating. Thanks for that, Jasper, in terms of giving us an insight into this world that I think many people are very interested in, but as I say, not that many people seem to take action on. Those that I do know that take coaching really swear by it, and swear by the results. But as I say, it's something I think there's probably a little bit of trepidation around, and you know, a lack of knowledge really. So it's been really helpful, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and I hope that you and your family continue to keep well.
Yeah, thanks. So I saw someone passing by in the mirror reflection earlier on, which is a typical homeschooling and home working scene. So thank you anyway, and apologies for that.
Well, when it comes to filming, we're amateurs, aren't we? But you know, I'm sure we'll all improve over the years. Take care.
Cheers, Simon.